Updating the infrastructure of this venerable city and its grand old tube is a way of life for Londoners.
I'm a Londoner before I'm anything else, before I'm English or British or anything. I mean, grew up here, lived here. So I'm a Londoner, but I'm that kind of, an underground Londoner, if you like. London to me was the tube line. I'd get into central London, and central London meant everything, really. That meant the world. And it also meant that I had the British Museum half an hour away, or I had a football team at the other end of a very complicated system an hour away that every Saturday I would trudge across the sea to West London. It meant that I had a city to call my own, and I was part of it, really. It gave me a community. I never ride on buses. Buses are funny. Londoners walk, get cabs, or they travel on the tube. Because that's the way that I grew up knowing London, is the tube lines. When you've got to manage 16 stops to get to Tottenham Court Road, you can think up loads of games to play on there. One of them is spot the destination. And that means you look at the person and you decide from what they're wearing and how they're behaving and what paper they're reading, where they're going to get off. And I would be 85% accurate by the time I was 14, because I've had like 7 or 8 years of doing this every day now, almost. And you can spot whether a person is a Golders Greener or whether they're a Hampsteadite. London kind of exists up alleyways, and in the back rooms, the snugs of pubs, where they maintain those Londons. And it exists on the fringes of the street markets, or it exists at 8 o'clock of a Sunday morning, but not at 9 o'clock, because you were there at the wrong time. And I think London is like that. It's a city that hides its pleasures to the outsiders, but revels in them quietly among its own.
Riding the boundary of Soho and Chinatown, which spruced itself up in the 1980s. Some Londoners worry about the survival of London's traditions.
Sadly, I think London has been, in the last 20 years, and is being very, very negligent with its hidden heritages. Of course, we list the great buildings, and, you know, you can't knock down Buckingham Palace to put a multi-storey car park. But you can turn, sadly, something like Covent Garden, which used to be a living, thriving London street market. You know, my mum would go there and get flowers if she really wanted a good spread. If someone had died or someone was getting married, you'd go to Covent Garden. And what did we do with it? We turned it into a place that sells souvenirs in a mock Italian esplanade. I mean, it's a very strange and wanton way to deal with our history, I think. I think it's partly that London suffers from its own success. You know, London is such a big, sprawling city that too few people live in its heart. Not many people live in those ones anymore. They all live out. And because our communications are developed to a level where they can, they've had to divorce themselves from where they work. So London, where people used to live and work cheek by jowl, they don't much anymore.